So our next talk is from Dr. Danny Garside from the Digital Research Academy. So when Danny was a postdoc in the neuroscience lab at the National Institutes of Health in Washington, DC, they were tasked with finding a replacement to the lab system of paper notebooks, and they settled on logseq. So very excited to hear about this because I must confess I don't actually know much about this tool. Danny is a neuroscientist and meta-scientist who splits their time between researching colour vision and trying to make academia more accessible, more efficient and happier. That's lovely. They are the community manager for the Digital Research Academy. So over to you, Danny.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Samantha. Yeah, so as Sam said, I was a postdoc at the National Institutes of Health. And by my own admission, I was one of those postdocs who was maybe a bit more interested in process than results, much to my PI's chagrin. But it meant that when NEH mandated that we move from paper to digital notebooks, my PI quite quickly went, "Hey, Danny, work this out for us. What should we be using?" I'm interested in meta science, open science, and open source, and so I was immediately interested to see if we could use an open source solution, so something that didn't lock us into Microsoft or some other big tech company, that we might be able to A, do for free, B, modify to suit our needs, and C, kind of to support these projects by using them to give feedback and to build additional tools since we had that technical capability. Okay, so we were looking for no vendor lock-in, and logseq offers this solution to that because the underlying files are just text files. They're in Markdown format, if folks are familiar with that, but it's just a very basic text file format. And so it's easy to move to another system later if we need to do that. If we want to just grab all of our data and move to a different system, fine. It's free. And so one of the interesting things about working within the US government is that there is lots of money, but spending it is a massive administrative burden. And so it being free is useful because we could actually adopt it quickly without having to spend a year getting it signed off on. We wanted something that was flexible. We wanted to be able to make it do whatever we wanted. And logseq offers that because it's fundamentally it's just a structured text editor, but it's open source. And so it's relatively easy to build additional things on top of it if somebody else hasn't got there already, and quite often they have. So there's lots of existing extensions available. And the core functionality is very strong. So it does things like image and PDF insertion, video embedding, LaTeX rendering, name some sort of markup, and it will probably be able to do it natively. And if not, somebody will have written an extension to do it. We wanted something that was version controlled and backed up so that if somebody made a mistake, they could unwind it, and so that we as a collective could go back and look at the history of projects. And again, since the underlying files are just text files, it's really well suited to version control with a system called Git or any other version control systems that you'd want to use. A little side note, the fact that this system uses Git means that for folks that don't know how to use that tool already, there's a little bit of a steeper learning curve, but it's also a great way to introduce that tool because you're just working with text files. And so it's once people learn how to use Git with this very kind of simple data, they can then go on to use it for storing data in a reproducible and open sciencey kind of way. We also wanted something that was collaborative. So we were a lab of about 10 people, and we wanted to use a system where we could refer to each other's notes and kind of tag people and things. And we did this via Git, but logseq has since introduced a native real-time collaboration. I think that is still in beta, but that looks like it's on the horizon very soon. But I think what we did via Git was very serviceable. It meant that everybody had access to everybody else's notes with a delay of maybe a day or so, because people would manually be pushing and pulling to the shared repository. We could, of course, have set up some continuous version control if we wanted kind of minute by minute access to each other's notes, but that wasn't a high priority for us. What does it look like? So, like I say, it really is just a fairly basic text editor. So it works on the system of nested bullets. And so on the screenshot on the left here, we have a screenshot of some notes that I made for a course that I teach on digital note taking for researchers. And so you can see there's this nested bullet structure and this cross-referencing thing. So if I were to click on Open Research here, it would take me to everything which I had ever tagged with the tag Open Research. And I can do clever things like filtering that. So I can say, okay, give me everything that this particular person has written about Open Research, or this particular person within the month of May 2022. I can do things like that very quickly and very easily. The view on the right, this is a kind of graph view of all of the tagged nodes here. And that's very pretty, but in practice, you very rarely look at that. But it is a nice way of seeing, oh, this person is working a lot with this person, or this person writes a lot about this topic. Maybe there's some synergy there. Mainly, it's just a pretty way to view the underlying network graph. I find that that's a nice thing to show people, but that they never actually go back and look at that. But it is a nice way of conceptualizing how this system is integrated across different people. Additional features. So it's got templates. So I use this for my own personal notes, and I have a daily template which automatically loads every day and reminds me to set some goals for the day and reminds me to reflect on the day at the end. You can do to-do list management. My life would be chaos actually if I didn't use the system personally. It's got a really neat way of saying, hey, give me my to-do list to do with just this one particular project, or give me just the high priority to do things. And since it is open source, you can modify it in any way you see fit. However, I do want to reiterate that the core offering, if you don't want to modify it at all, the core offering is great. It's very feature rich. It's very easy to embed PDFs, images, online videos. It's got this whiteboard feature, so if you like drawing or writing with a pen, you can do that. And there's also the possibility to make it public. So if you wanted to do open notebook science, so this is where people are continuously sharing publicly the work that they're doing with under the umbrella of open science, so making all the work that we do more transparent and accessible to people. And this is an example. I have an open notebook on my website, and that links to the page that I showed a screenshot of on the previous slide. What did I learn from doing this project? The tech is the easy bit. The people are harder, and the institution is the hardest. What do I mean by that? So when I wrote out the blog post saying kind of, how did we make the system? In my head, it was going to be this long technical blog post of how we did these things, because it was something that took me a while to actually build and work out how we were going to use. And once I wrote it, I realized that actually the way that we use it is you download the thing, and then there's a couple of configuration lines that we add to make it more easy to share across people. And then a couple of paragraphs of instructions that we give to people on how to use it in a way that means that it works well for what we're using. So the tech is fairly easy. Writing those instructions for people didn't mean that they followed those instructions. So actually convincing people to use it in the way that meant that we could all kind of work on the same thing together in a way that meant that you could find somebody else's notes, rather than people just going off and being like, well, I think it's better if I do it this way. That was slightly harder. And then when I say the institution is hardest, I think the system lasted and worked well for a couple of years. And then NEH strolled in and were like, okay, we now have a notebook system that everybody's going to use. Everybody use this one. And that's, on the one hand, a bit of a shame. But on the other hand, I'm glad that we used a system that was open source. And so it was easy to pick up all the data and move to this new system. A couple of links. As I said, I wrote a blog post about this, which has some of the technical details. Although, like I say, there's very few technical details. There's a link to logseq's website, and you can ask me about this and other open source options. All my contact details are on my website.
Thank you very much, Danny. Awesome. That I do have follow-up questions, but I will do that in the Q&A panel.